LSU offers Garrett Nussmeier's brother for the class of 2027. Could we see Nuss Bus the sequel? We're talking about it. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe on your favorite app, rate us, leave a review on YouTube, smash that like button, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com. LSU doled out not one, but two quarterback offers for the class of 2027, and one of them is from Baton Rouge, is the number one quarterback in the country. The other is a legacy. It's Garrett Nussmeier's brother, Colton. Could we see Nuss Bus the sequel? We'll get to that. Also, Brian Kelly recapping the win over South Alabama, including a little bit of continued concern over the safety position. How do they fix it? We'll let you hear from BK here in a smidge. But something we do after every game here this season is we're going to dive into Pro Football Focus and the numbers that the guys over at PFF come up with after LSU's most recent game. And I always find it interesting because this does sort of tell the story in some sense. Like, for example, a week ago, we told you the highest rated players defensively were on your defensive line. The lowest rated players were in your secondary. It continues to speak to what Brian Kelly has talked about. So, and by the way, there are players, like every player that played is rated, whether if they played one snap or every snap. So, for example, like Devon Keys, the freshman linebacker, was the fourth highest rated defensive player for LSU. He played 3 snaps. So a little bit of a caveat there. So we will kind of make our way through these numbers a little bit. And again, I don't want you to get caught up too much on the numbers themselves and as much as what they mean. So we'll delve into that. This should come as no surprise to anybody, but the highest graded player, offense or defense, was Caden Durham with an 89.1. He was absolutely magnificent with the first 2 touches he had, going for 71 yards and a touchdown, 86 yards, and being stopped at the 1-yard line. But Caden Durham was awesome. If you missed the previous episode, we did tell you 2 dislocated toes for Caden Durham. How long will that recovery take? Don't know. I'll remind you also, no Brian Kelly media availability. He does not have his Monday press conference when there's an open date. So we will not talk to Brian Kelly. He will be on the SEC Coaches Teleconference on Wednesday. So that'll be the next time we have an opportunity to catch up with Brian Kelly. Garrett Nussmeier, number 2 on the list, which is a little surprising considering he had the 2 interceptions, but it spoke to how efficient he was otherwise. You know, accounting for 4 touchdowns, throwing for over 400 yards. A great day for Garrett Nussmeier. Will Campbell was 3rd. Whit Weeks was 4th. Savion Jones, the 5th highest rated LSU player among the starters. And interesting on Campbell, as noted as he is for his pass blocking, his run blocking grade was actually higher. And it was great to see Whit Weeks have the day that he did, the 2nd highest rated player defensively. But JVR Suggs was the highest rated player defensively for LSU. And I would like to point this out. It's 2 weeks in a row now that JVR Suggs has been the highest rated defensive player. A week ago, it was on just 8 snaps, but he had 4 pressures on 8 snaps. On Saturday against South Alabama, Suggs played 11 snaps, and he had a tackle, he had a hurry, he had an assisted tackle. He continues to be effective in his limited playing time. So that was good to see. Some of the other highlights among the top-rated guys that I didn't mention, Ahmad Bro was the 5th highest-rated player defensively for LSU, and he just continues to impress. An overall grade of 72.9. Gabe Relaford was 2 spots behind him. Greg Penn and Gabe Relaford. So you continue to see these young guys. I know we've talked about it a bunch, and I don't mean to be a broken record, but it continues to underscore what we keep saying. And I'm not just providing this as affirmation. It's evidence of what is actually happening here. Your younger guys are your more talented guys, and they're the ones that are performing. Now, I could also mention on the other end, if you go look at the bottom of the PFF rankings defensively again this week, Xavier Atkins, a freshman linebacker, had 10 snaps. He was your lowest rated player. West Weeks, and if you heard our previous episode, I did mention this. West Weeks only took 4 snaps. He took 4 snaps, and he was a total grade of 41.9, which is atrocious. He's still feeling the effects. He took himself out of the game. That was very evident. And then they replaced him on the inside with Devon Keys, who played Mike in his place. Jair Brown, the third lowest. Jordan Allen, fourth lowest. And then the freshman, Deshaun Spears, Javen Toviano. But look at what all of those players have in common. Atkins is a freshman linebacker. Weeks was hurt. But then Brown, Allen, Spears, Toviano, all defensive backs. Then Sean Washington, then J.K. Johnson. Again, it just continues to solidify that point that your problem right now, for all we focused on the defensive line, the interior defensive line, the big struggle has been finding consistent play in your secondary. Something Brian Kelly talked about after the game. You're going to hear that in just a smidge. Now, that was defensively. Offensively, for LSU in this game, we mentioned Caden, Durham, and Garrett Nussmeier leading the way. Will Campbell and Garrett Dellinger, Mason Taylor, Kyron Lacey, veteran players. Durham's a freshman, but Nussmeier, Campbell, Dellinger, Taylor, Lacey, all veteran players that you expect to be leaders, and they all continue to play exceptionally well. The flip side of that is if you go to the bottom, there is a pretty consistent theme here as well. If I start at the bottom of the PFF rankings and work my way up, so Bo Bordelon, who got in at right guard at the end of the game, Shelton Sampson, Paul Mabenga, who went in at left guard at the end of the game, CJ Daniels, who was dinged for the holding penalty, but he played 51 snaps and was pretty good. The holding penalty really just buried his ranking. Caleb Jackson, Kamorian Pimpton, Cohen Eccles, freshman center, who went in late. And then this was a bit of a surprise. Miles Frazier and Emory Jones are your two lowest rated starters outside of CJ Daniels offensively. And with Frazier, it was interesting because he had an actually exceptional run blocking grade. Frazier had an exceptional pass blocking grade at 85.9, which is, I checked really quickly. Yeah, Miles Frazier's pass blocking grade was the highest pass blocking grade on the team, but his run blocking grade was a 55. So it really buried, his run blocking grade was a 50.5, which buried his grade down to a 55. As for Emory Jones, he just had a rough day around. Emory Jones is fantastic. I don't worry about him, but a 54 run blocking grade, a 58 pass blocking grade. Remember, Jones did hurt his ankle a week ago in that UCLA game, came out, went back in after they retaped him. That's a guy who might still be feeling the effects of that ankle injury. And this week off will, I think, do him an awful lot of good. But it's always interesting when you delve into that. And my big takeaways from the PFF grades, your freshman defenders are continuing to play well, especially in the front seven. Your defensive backs continue to be the Achilles heel of this entire team. Offensively, all of your veterans, Nussmeier, Will Campbell, Mason Taylor, Kyron Lacey, Garrett Dellinger, were your highest rated players along with Caden Durham. And there at the bottom, some young guys who got in late who maybe didn't do so great. But that's why you hope you don't have to rely on them. But it's also why it's good to get them experience when you can in situations like that. Okay. A couple of things that you're going to hear from Brian Kelly post-game that sort of speak to those things. He does talk pretty openly about the safeties there as well, and also about how they're using their rotations. I think you can find this interesting because the time for tinkering is over for LSU. You have 7 more games, and they're all SEC games. You don't have any more time to figure it out. The next time you're on the field, you're playing Ole Miss, and you better be ready to roll. So they better have figured it out at this point. We'll discuss that as we come back. You'll hear from Brian Kelly. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Remember, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Depending on when you're watching this, Monday Night Football or any football Saturday or Sunday, you want to bet, you do so at FanDuel. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com. Brian Kelly met with reporters after the win over South Alabama, and we always on these shows as we start the week over the PFF grades and then recap what Brian Kelly had to say. And let me just handle some business out of the way first. We mentioned Garrett Nussmeier, who was the second highest graded player according to PFF, but he did have the two ugly interceptions. Brian Kelly was asked about both interceptions, and I tend to echo his sentiments here, but he explained it both.
The one right before the half, he tried to force a ball in there that we would have liked him to be much more prudent in dropping the ball down. The second interception, those are plays that he knows better. Like you're moving to the right, you have better options there. I think he probably got caught up a little bit in the game in that situation. It was late. We were up pretty big. I think in the right circumstances and situation, I'm not here to defend him for that because he knew that he needed to do a better job with the ball. I'm not here panicked about what happened tonight with the two interceptions. There are some where you go, oh my God. These were decisions that are easily correctable, and I'm not concerned about the two interceptions from that perspective.
Especially since through 5 games, Garrett Nussmeier, of the 2 interceptions he had thrown, one of them was the late game interception against USC where you're just trying to make a play. Garrett Nussmeier had one gigantic question coming into this season, and it was his ability to protect the ball, his decision-making, the gunslinger mentality people talk about all the time. That was something that had been a problem. And Brian Kelly insisted the analogy he gave so many times was the used car, the rental car against his car. When it's the rental car, you'll eat food in it, you'll ding it up. You don't worry because it's not your car. When it's your car, you're going to take more care of it. Well, that's kind of the analogy Brian Kelly used for Garrett Nussmeier with this offense. And he has taken much better care of the football. It's undeniable. I agree. Look, he tried to make a play at the end of the first half. He had the receiver open, actually, just underthrew it a bit. And then the one at the start of the second half was a terrible decision, and Garrett Nussmeier knows better, but you were up big in that situation. And after that, he responded by leading a 99-yard touchdown drive. So, yes, I think it's just fine. Now, on the other side of the ball, there's 2 things Brian Kelly said that I want to jump into. One is specifically about safeties. So we're going to get to that in a second, because that continues to be this team's biggest issue, and Brian Kelly is all but admitting that. But he was asked sort of an open-ended question about, at this point in the season, the defensive improvement. LSU right now is 71st in the country in total defense. And when you consider where they were a year ago in the triple digits, that is a marked improvement. Also considering you didn't have an easy September. You played 2 Big Ten teams, a road SEC game, and then a home game as well. This past weekend against South Alabama and then Nicholls. So the fact that you played 2 Big Ten teams and a road SEC game, it was a much tougher September than most other teams had, where you might stat compile early. That's why some of those averages always come to the norm. But we've seen the defense improve. They haven't given up the big chunk running plays the last 2 weeks. We're not seeing defensive breakdowns and busts in the secondary. So there are things that are showing growth from a year ago. And Brian Kelly was asked about that defensive improvement here through the first month.
I think there are a couple of plays, at our safety position where, we just have to be better, and getting out of our pedal and playing the 9 route. I think we need to be better there. I thought we missed a couple of tackles, but overall, structurally, we're heading in the right direction. We thought we closed the gap last week. I think we continue to close the gap, and quite frankly, we have to, right? As we get into SEC play, the teams that we play they'll expose you if you don't. So we're making the progress necessary that we need to.
Making the progress necessary that you need to. Interesting also that he started those comments there by mentioning his safeties. He wasn't asked about safety. He started by saying we need to improve our safety play. But the necessary improvement, consider this. A week ago, you allowed over 200 yards in the first half to UCLA. You allowed 89 total yards in the second half and shut them out. South Alabama was one of the top 20 offensive teams in the country. They ran for over 300 yards a week ago when they played Appalachian State. And LSU held South Alabama to 333 of total offense, 221 through the air, just 112 on the ground. And quite honestly, the bulk of it came on that scoring drive in the second half. So I thought LSU defensively put together back-to-back very solid defensive performances after what was an abomination on the road against South Carolina. You've rebounded with your best half of football against UCLA and then your best game so far against South Alabama. Now, specifically about the safeties, there was a question that came later where Brian Kelly was specifically asked about safety. And again, this is one of the reasons why I think it's important that you're actually listening and you're paying attention here on Locked on LSU, because I want to remind you, I asked Brian Kelly last week at his Monday presser about the safety position because they played 6 safeties last week against UCLA. There are 2 safeties on the field. LSU played 6 throughout the game. It's very clear they're trying to get guys reps to see who could play, who they can trust when they no longer have the luxury of rotating 6 safeties in the secondary. And Brian Kelly effectively admitted the same thing.
Look, it's not like we're pressing them and putting them down on the line of scrimmage. I mean, I think we just have to be technically better, not necessarily ask somebody to do something that they can't do. We were 12 yards deep, and we were late getting out of our pedal. So the guys can play the position. They just have to be technically better. And then we're going to, Tuesday we're going to put the guys on the field that we think can win SEC games for us. So what's that rotation look like? As we've said, and we've talked about this, we've rolled a lot of guys in there. We get to, 2 weeks from today, there's not going to be a lot of rolling. There's going to be guys that are going to be playing. So this has kind of been to try to get it on film and say, these are the guys that should be starting.
He is telling you point blank. They have used this month as live bullet training. We're going to roll a lot of guys in there, put it on film, see who deserves the play, because once you play Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is in here with that offense, you ain't rolling a whole bunch of guys, and you're not figuring it out. The time for figuring it out is over. And one of the things that I have contended for a long time is that Sage Ryan is a natural safety, and that is his best position. While a lot of people have given up on Sage Ryan, my contention has been he was injured as a freshman. He played both in the slot. He played boundary corner. His natural position is safety. Well, lo and behold, against South Alabama on Saturday, Sage Ryan was actually your highest graded defensive back. He was the 8th highest graded player on the entire defense. And among starters, he was the 5th highest rated player among your defensive starters in the game. Only Whitweek, Savion Jones, Ahmad Bro, and Greg Penn rated higher. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Sage Ryan's an All-American or even an All-SEC player. But at safety, he's one of your 2 best guys. Now, Kylan Jackson, who we saw play in the star and in the strong safety role, he had 16 snaps. He was rated just ahead of Jordan Gilbert, who played free safety, rotated with Sage Ryan. He had 28 snaps there. And then it's a big drop-off before you get down to Major Burns. And then, as we mentioned, down at the bottom, the freshman Deshaun Spears, Jordan Allen, who has struggled. I don't know that you'd care to, but if you want to go back to our fall camp, preview shows, one of the things I said pretty consistently when Jordan Allen was running at first team safety and Sage Ryan was running at first team cornerback, one of the things that we talked about was a best case scenario was you get Zy Alexander healthy, and then Sage Ryan can kit back to safety alongside Jordan Gilbert. And if Gilbert sticks there, if Kylan Jackson wins reps, or if maybe it's Deshaun Spears who continues to start. I don't know. I don't know what they're ultimately going to do there. But Deshaun Spears and Sage Ryan started at safety for LSU in this ball game, and Major Burns started at the star, and then you saw Jordan Gilbert rotate in, and Kylan Jackson rotate in. So you played all, and Jordan Allen as well. So you played 6 again. Who are you settling on whenever you take the field against Ole Miss? And do you go with the young guy in Deshaun Spears, who's got the high upside, or do you go with the veteran guys who have been through those SEC wars It's a decision they're going to have to make after looking at all the film here in this bye week. By the way, Brian Kelly, very quickly on the plan for the bye week. This is not going to be a rest week for LSU.
It's not really a recovery week. We're going to practice. We still have some real work to get done. We'll treat the second bye week as a recovery week. This will be a kind of a work week for us.
It's not a bad idea, but to be very clear, I don't think anybody that's injured, that's battling anything right there is going to be working through it. You need Caden Durham healthy. Zy Alexander coming off a concussion, you got to make sure he clears the protocol. If Emory Jones is still feeling the lingering effects of his ankle, you get him off his feet. There's spots where you have to work. In your secondary, you got to get better in your secondary. You got to get some of these young linebackers ready. You continue to make the defensive line better every day that you go out there and you get work done. So, yes, there's spots where you're going to go do work this week, no doubt. But at the same time, you're not going to be careless when you have this opportunity. I'll remind you, Ole Miss, who lost at home this week to Kentucky, now they're going to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks, who, by the way, had a bye. And then they're coming to Baton Rouge to take on LSU coming off a bye. So you could be rested and ready, taking on an Ole Miss team that could be bruised and battered. So don't forfeit the advantage you have. I don't suggest Brian Kelly would. Okay, from the present to the future, over the weekend, LSU offered not one but two quarterback prospects, and one of them has the same last name of LSU's current quarterback. We'll talk about that next. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Y'all get on by and download that Game Time app if you haven't done so yet. If you love attending live events, whether it's sports or music or theater or comedy, Game Time is what you got to get. By the way, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and it makes getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier. So Game Time Picks will filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't even have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Download the Game Time app right now. Do it right now and start tinkering in the app and learning more about it. I've told you plenty of times about all the things that I love about Game Time. I love the all-in pricing. I told you I had an experience where wife and I were in New York. We wanted to go to a basketball game at Madison Square Garden. I thought I was getting a deal. By the time I got to checkout, price was almost double of what the price was on the on the face of the app. Not at Game Time. At Game Time, it's all in pricing. So you toggle that feature and it'll show the total up front. So there's no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly what it's going to cost you. You get panoramic seat views in the app. And they got the lowest ticket price guarantee. They'll credit you 110% of the difference. It's Game Time. Hey, look, if you haven't done it yet, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. As we put a button here on this episode of Locked On LSU, LSU over the weekend handed out not one but two quarterback offers for the class of 2027. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but it's worth mentioning this, okay? Because, of course, if you're talking about the quarterback position, that is going to be notable, number one. And then on top of that, both of these prospects, for different reasons, are super notable. On Thursday, Elijah Haven, who's the number one quarterback in the country for the class of 2027, again, high school sophomores. Elijah Haven from the Durham School right here in Baton Rouge, 6'4", 205. Joe Sloan, I was told, went and attended Elijah Haven's entire game on Thursday. And then on Friday, they gave Haven his formal offer. And you might shrug your shoulders and say, well, what's the big deal? He's the number one quarterback in the country, and he's also from Baton Rouge. Of course, LSU is going to offer him. There's some validity to that. I'm not going to try to debunk that. But when you hear what the rest of the quarterback class for 2027 looks like, it calls into question exactly who you're targeting. Now, by the way, Haven, who, as we mentioned, 6'4", 205 as a high school sophomore, is the number one quarterback in the country. Offers from Ole Miss, Baylor, Florida, Texas Tech, Miami, already LSU, Florida State's been interested. I mean, he's going to have offers from everybody by the time it's all said and done. And from my understanding, talking to some people around the Durham school and on the Durham staff, this is a local kid who probably has eyes on staying in Baton Rouge and would love the opportunity to stay in Baton Rouge and play for the LSU Tigers. Now, there's a long way to go in his recruitment, obviously, and there's a lot of factors that will play in as far as who's currently at LSU, and then on top of that, you're also going to look at who's here for who's still here at the quarterback position. Garrett Nussmeier will have been graduated, of course, but does Ricky Collins stay? Colin Hurley is playing out his true freshman season right now. Bryce Underwood is coming to campus. How long is Underwood on campus? Is he a 3-year guy, a 4-year guy? Don't know. So there's a lot still that's going to factor in there into that decision. But they offered Elijah Haven on Friday. And then one day later, they offered another quarterback for the class of 2027. And this is where it gets interesting. So Elijah Haven's the number 1 quarterback in the country. Colton Nussmeier. If the name sounds familiar, it should. He is the younger brother of Garrett Nussmeier. It's not just a legacy offer. Colton Nussmeier, who's in the Dallas area, Flower Mound, is the number 3 quarterback in the country for the class of 2027. He's already started. And by the way, 6'3", 175. Garrett Nussmeier gave an interview with On3 and Shea Dixon over the summer when Colton Nussmeier was camping at LSU. And he kind of hemmed and hawed and acknowledged that Colton, at this point, as a high school sophomore, actually is more talented than Garrett was at this point. Long way to go until he signs and ends up on a college campus. But he's already got more than a dozen offers. TCU, SMU, Baylor, Wisconsin, Texas Tech, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Minnesota, NC State, Ole Miss, North Carolina, LSU, Notre Dame has been interested. He's going to have everybody offer. So that's another one worth keeping an eye on. And then it gets even more dense because Malachi Ziegler is the 5th highest rated prospect in the country at quarterback for 2027. And Malachi Ziegler is out of Benton, Louisiana. He is a 6'3", 195-pound quarterback, the number 46 overall prospect in the country. By the way, Elijah Haven in the composite is the number 3 overall prospect. Nussmeier is the number 19 overall prospect. And then Malachi Ziegler is the number 46 overall prospect. LSU has not offered Malachi Ziegler yet, but that is an in-state kid from Louisiana, and you can't pass on that kid. You have got to recruit him and offer him. He already has offers from Ole Miss and Oklahoma State and Mississippi State, Arkansas, Baylor, TCU, SMU. And an LSU offer is going to come at some point, but they've already doled out 2. Look, you're very excited about Bryce Underwood coming in. I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse, get too ahead of myself. But when you start to think about the pipeline of quarterback at LSU, where you've had 2 Heisman Trophy winners in the last 5 years, now Garrett Nussmeier has been incredible. You got Bryce Underwood coming in as well. And then who knows what happens in the class of 26. And then already you've got 3 really elite prospects on the board for 2027. 2 of them have an offer. One of them in Baton Rouge, one of them in Benton, and the other is the younger brother of LSU's current quarterback. Suffice to say, the quarterback pipeline at LSU looks like it's going to stay pretty stacked in the coming years. Okay, that's going to do it for us here on this edition of Locked On LSU. Hey, now, thanks for making us your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, why don't you go check out Locked On College Football? We've got it linked in the description here on YouTube and on podcast. So no need to go search for it. Make your second listen Locked On College Football. Hey, if you're on podcast, do us a favor. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you are on YouTube, smash that like button. Hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Please subscribe as well. We'd appreciate it. And let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.